Hey there, Sharon Horne-Ellstrom here. Welcome to day 244 of our BU 365-day challenge to do one thing every day that improves us in some way. Today we are beginning the segment on our ninth and final area of the life framework, and that is communication. We've talked about physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, financial, relationships, contribution, confidence last month, and communication this month. For the first 9 months of this annual challenge, I thought it would be awesome to break down and share exactly what I do in my life to set my big long-term goals and objectives, and then to break those down into bite-sized pieces so I'm doing something every day, and then how we automate that so that achieving our long-term goals and objectives becomes just a part of our everyday life and everyday living. And that's what this challenge is all about. How do we do little incremental things every day that move us toward becoming the best possible version of ourselves and how we show up in the world, etc. So this month we're focusing on the area of communication. Prior to last year, I've used a 7-part framework for decades, probably 4 decades or more, that I learned originally from Tony Robbins and Jim Rohn and some other big name professional development and personal development people. And that served me really, really well. But during the pandemic and COVID and everything, a couple areas of life became even more important than they had been to me personally prior to that. And that was the areas of confidence and communication. Because all of a sudden, billions of people, not just some people or some of us changing on purpose all the time, but the entire world was impacted in ways, and we had to figure out different ways to connect and communicate and have confidence in the new technologies and things that we were having to adopt and apply to our businesses and our everyday life. Some of those things were really, really challenging and didn't really work out great for us. Other things were a little bit challenging, but we figured them out using our confidence and our communication skills, and they became easy and just now a natural part of our repertoire. Doing daily videos used to be really, really hard for me, but during the pandemic it was a blessing because it gave me focus and it allowed me to spend energy on things that I knew were moving me forward at days and times when everything else was at a dead stop. So, communication. Our topic today is, what does communication mean to you? Communication is, of course, the imparting or exchange of knowledge or information or news. So, for example, for the moment, I am in communication with so-and-so. Maybe it's the government, maybe it's a person, maybe it's an organization, but it's a source of information. We'll talk about all these things. I've got, of course, our content calendar mapped out in pencil because I change it when I so choose. But the things that we're going to do and we're going to cover. We're going to cover using a similar structure to the last few months because I think it's worked really, really well. We'll, of course, cover our SOAP framework because that is our process for dealing with changes and challenges that make it automatic that we get better results after having experienced the change or challenge, the best possible results for us than before we experience that change or challenge. We'll be doing that next week. This week we'll talk about definitions. We'll talk about and we'll rate like we have before. How do we think we're doing in different areas and aspects of communication? So what does communication mean today? And our action item is going to be just to share, when you hear communication, what is your first thought? What is the first thing that comes to mind, and what does it mean to you? So it is either, excuse me, I better take a sip of coffee. What does it mean to you? I'm going to have to do this because it means a lot to me. I think it's so interconnected and intertwined with everything we do, be, have, and are. It makes it more challenging to actually define it. But again, like anything else, what it means to you right now, what you want it to mean to you, is the most important thing. It doesn't matter what it means to anyone else around you or in your life or anyone you've ever heard of. What matters is, what does it mean to you and how it's going to impact how you make choices and decisions and take action or don't take action moving forward. A lot of people during the pandemic were absolutely frozen in place by all the conflicting information and all the crazy information that was being thrown out about COVID and the pandemic in the news, which was, it's done intentionally. Whenever people communicate, they have an intent or a purpose behind that communication, and how it's presented to you is usually done intentionally, because people want something, or organizations want something from you or us, right? So the news, for example, as many people that religiously watch the news, because we've been trained to watch the news every day, unless we've thought for ourselves and shut that training off, the vast majority of the people catch the news either on television or on social media or through the newspaper. Some people still read the newspaper, or magazines, or other ways of getting information. My best source of information in the past had always been my mother-in-law. I turned off the news in the 80s because I realized back then how manipulative and corrupt and untrue and unfactual it was. Instead of reporting the who, what, where, when, why, and how, the news shifted literally decades ago to being a medium of propaganda for whoever's paying the most. So we need to remember that as we're experiencing sources of information, and we'll talk about this month, how do we filter out, how do we get various sources of information to make sure that we're making decisions based on a wide spectrum of information, not just one narrow source, because one narrow source can easily be manipulated and corrupted, right? If I'm only getting my news from Facebook, I'm probably in big trouble. If I'm only getting my news from one TV station, I'm probably in trouble. If I'm only reading one book and then I'm going out and I'm doing whatever that book says, I'm only getting one author's opinion and thoughts on a topic or a subject or a strategy. So I want to make sure that I'm getting more than one source of information before I actually take action sometimes. Not sometimes, all the time. So I want to make sure I'm doing what's best for me, and you need to do the same. So what's your definition of communication? And what comes to mind first? When you hear communication, what do you think of first? A lot of people hear communication and they get a sense of dread because they think it means public speaking, or having to speak up and share your opinion, or talk about subjects that you maybe don't feel 100% capable and confident talking about. So we'll talk about that as well. So that is our introduction, not much of an introduction, but just to get us thinking about this area and aspect of our life, because until a couple of years ago, I knew there were things in communication that had to do with communication that I wanted to improve and was working on a little bit, but it wasn't until last year that I added communication and confidence to my long-term goals list, and I said, okay, I need to make, and I got a coach in that area and aspect of my life, which is part of why I'm sharing it with you, and started to actually make real steps and real strides toward improving those areas and aspects of my life. So, communication this month. Any questions, concerns, topics you want to make sure we cover, please either Voxer me at pajamagrandma@gmail.com or direct message me so that we make sure everything gets covered that we want to get covered. And then we still have 3 months left in the year that we're going to cover a lot of different things. And if we want to go back and review anything or do anything differently or dive more deeply into a topic, share that as well, and I'll make sure that we do that. All right, have an awesome day. I'll, of course, be with you tomorrow.